A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to the World News Review on Independent Television Abuja. I am Kiru Obuli. Sunday, China approved the removal of term limits for its leader in a move that effectively allows Xi Jinping to remain a president for life. Let's join Gabriel Kumar for this and more on the foreign scene.
China has approved the removal of 2 limits for its leader in a move that effectively allows Xi Jinping to remain as president for life. The constitutional changes were passed by China's annual sitting of the National People's Congress on Sunday. The vote was widely regarded as a rubber stamping exercise. 2 delegates voted against the change and 3 abstained. Out of 2,964 votes, China had imposed a 2-term limit on its presidents since the 1990s. But Mr. Xi, who would have been due to step down in 2023, defied the tradition of presenting a potential successor during October's Communist Party Congress. Instead, he consolidated his political power as the party voted to enshrine his name and political ideology in the party's constitution, elevating his status to the level of its founder, Chairman Mao. An official said a lightning strike killed at least 16 people and injured dozens more at a Seventh-day Adventist church in Rwanda. The local mayor said most of the victims died instantly when lightning hit the church in the southern district of Nyaruguru. 2 people died from their injuries and 140 people were rushed to hospital and health centers. Lightning also killed a student in the area on Friday. The deadly church incident comes less than 2 weeks after the closure of more than 700 Rwandan churches for failing to comply with building regulations and for noise pollution. President Donald Trump said his planned summit with North Korea leader Kim Jong-un could either fail or bring about the greatest deal for the world. At a political rally in Pennsylvania, Mr. Trump told supporters he believed North Korea wanted to make peace, but he said he might leave the talks quickly if it didn't look like progress for nuclear disarmament. In a speech, the U.S. leader warned of tariffs on European cars and launched his slogan for re-election in 2020. In his wide-ranging speech, he said he hoped a deal to ease nuclear tensions would happen, particularly to help countries like North Korea. He also said he believed the North Koreans would honor their commitment not to test any more missiles. Russia says it has successfully test-launched a hypersonic missile, one of a range of nuclear-capable weapons announced by President Vladimir Putin earlier this month. The country's defense ministry released video footage showing the missile detaching from a fighter jet and leaving a fiery trail behind it. It said the intended target was hit. On March 1, Mr. Putin described the Kenzai missile, named for a type of dagger, as an ideal weapon. He said it was part of a new stockpile of invincible weapons. The Kenzai is said to travel at 10 times the speed of sound and have a range of 2,000 kilometers. The Defense Ministry said the missile was launched from a MiG-31 jet that took off from an airfield in southwest Russia on Saturday. Mr. Putin is widely expected to be re-elected as Russia's president in a week's time. The U.S. State Department said this was not the behavior of a responsible international player.
Syrian regime forces advanced against rebels in eastern Ghouta and pounded 2 towns with airstrikes on Monday as they move closer to retake the opposition enclave on the edge of Damascus. 3 weeks after launching a fierce offensive to capture the region, forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad have overrun more than half of Ghouta, whittling down rebel territory to 3 isolated pockets. Backed by Russia, the advance has battered eastern Ghouta with airstrikes, artillery, and rocket fire, raising widespread international concern and prompting urgent calls for a ceasefire. The assault on eastern Ghouta has been one of the most ferocious of Syria Civil War, which a monitoring group said on Monday had left more than 350,000 people dead in 7 years. Meanwhile, South Korea said it has not received a response from Pyongyang on a summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump. In a surprise development, Mr. Trump on Friday accepted North Korea's invitation to direct talks. South Korea's officials say Mr. Kim was prepared to give up his nuclear weapons. Details of the planned talks remain vague, with no agreement yet on the location or agenda. Analysts are skeptical about what can be achieved through talks given the complexity of the issues involved. Meanwhile, a plane carrying 71 passengers and crew crashed on landing at Nepal's Kathmandu airport, killing at least 40 people, leaving 23 survivors. For this and more on Foreign News, let's join Charity Tanko.
A plane carrying 71 passengers and crew has crashed on landing at Nepal's Kathmandu airport, killing at least 40 people, leaving 23 survivors. Rescuers pulled bodies from the charred wreckage of the plane, operated by Bangladesh airline US Bangla, after a raging fire was put out. Flight BS211 veered off the runway while landing on Monday afternoon. All flights in and out of Tribhuvan International Airport have been cancelled. In a press briefing, Imran Asif, CEO of US Bangla Airlines, said the pilot of the aircraft, Abid Sultan, is injured and is getting treatment. Asif said the airline is suspecting a miscommunication between the pilot and the control tower at the airport. State media says Ethiopian soldiers killed 9 civilians and injured 12 after mistaking them for rebels near a town along the country's border with Kenya. The soldiers were deployed to the Moyal area of the country's Oromia region in pursuit of Oromo Liberation Front fighters who had crossed into Ethiopia from 3 locations. Several soldiers have been suspended and are under investigation. The Oromo Liberation Front is a secessionist group which the government has branded as terrorists. Taliban fighters have taken over a police headquarters in Afghanistan's western Farah province during an ongoing battle with the security forces, as officials warned the district was likely to be taken over by the armed group. At least 20 members of the security forces are believed to be killed or wounded when the fighters attacked the Analdara district police and administrative offices on Monday morning. Officials said the exact number of killed or wounded is still not clear. A senior official in the province said that reinforcements have reached the area in a bid to push back the fighters.
Federal police in Mexico have arrested a man they say is a key suspect in the disappearance of 43 students from the town of Iguala in 2014. Eric Gurel Sandoval is accused of forming part of the gang that is thought to have killed the trainee teachers and burnt their bodies. He was arrested in Cocola, the town near the rubbish dump, where remains of one of the missing students were found. The disappearance of the 43 caused outrage in Mexico and abroad. Alfredo Heguera from the prosecutor's office in charge of investigating the case said that Mr. Sandoval was accused of having played a key role in the actions against the students. The United Nations during the week expected civilian evacuations out of the rebel-held eastern Ghouta on Tuesday as the Syrian military continues its first offensive on the enclave. The UN has previously called for an evacuation of nearly 1,000 sick people and wounded residents who needed urgent medical treatment. Jaish al-Islam, one of the main rebel groups in eastern Ghouta, said on Monday it had reached an agreement with the government's key ally Russia to evacuate wounded people. No other details about the evacuations were given. Hamza Deter, the group's military spokesman, vowed on Tuesday that the fighters will continue to defend Damascus suburb till the end. Syrian government forces have captured more than half the enclave, splintering it as they seek to crush the last major rebel bastion near the capital, Damascus. An explosion in the Gaza Strip has targeted the convoy of the Palestinian Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah. Mr. Hamdallah was unharmed, but there are reports of some injuries. President Mahmoud Abbas condemned the cowardly attack on the convoy and said he held the militant group Hamas, which dominates Gaza, are responsible. The incident took place amid heightened tensions between the main Palestinian factions over the implementation of a reconciliation deal signed last year. Palestinians in the Gaza and the West Bank have been ruled separately since a rift between Hamas and Mr. Abbas' Fatah faction erupted in violence in 2007. U.S. President Donald Trump has sacked Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, replacing him with Director of the CIA Mike Pompeo just after his visit to President Muhammadu Buhari of Nigeria. For details of this and more, let's join Blessing Umaru.
Donald Trump has sacked Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, replacing him with the Director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo. Thanking Mr. Tillerson for his service, Mr. Trump said the new State Secretary will do a fantastic job. Mr. Tillerson, a former chief executive of ExxonMobil, was only appointed to the job just over a year ago. The president also nominated Gina Haspel to become the first woman director of the CIA. Mr. Tillerson was on an official tour of Africa when he was apparently caught unawares by Mr. Trump's announcement that he would hold talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un before his sack. 38 people have been killed in Ethiopia after the bus they were traveling in flung off a cliff. The accident happened in Legambo district in the country's Amhara region, north of the capital Addis Ababa. Local officials have confirmed 28 men and 10 women were killed. 10 passengers survived but suffered serious and minor injuries. The Turkish military says it has surrendered the Kurdish-held city of Afrin in northern Syria, the focus of an offensive against a Kurdish militia. A statement said troops and allied Syrian rebels had also captured critically important areas. A Kurdish source confirmed that all roads into the city were now being targeted by Turkish shell fire. Hundreds of civilians reportedly fled the city to nearby areas controlled by the Syrian government on Monday. The Turkish operation aimed at driving the Kurdish People's Protection Unit militia out of Afrin began on 20th January.
And former U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has warned of Russia's troubling behavior and actions in a parting statement after being fired by President Donald Trump. He pointedly failed to thank Mr. Trump or praise his policies. The former ExxonMobil chief had a series of public rifts with the White House after being appointed last year. Mr. Trump officially fired Mr. Tillerson via Twitter, naming CIA Director Mike Pompeo as his replacement. Mr. Trump also named Gina Haspel to become the CIA's first female director. Still in the United States, students and staff across the country are planning to commemorate the Florida school shooting with a walkout exactly 1 month after the killings. Organizers have called on them to stop lectures or lessons for 17 minutes in memory of the 17 people killed at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School by a former pupil. The walkouts are due to begin at 10 a.m. across America's time zone. Organizers accuse Congress of failing to tackle gun violence adequately. The White House revealed a plan to deter school shootings, which does not include President Donald Trump's repeated calls to raise the age for buying semi-automatic rifles to 21. The British government says it will suspend high-level bilateral contact with Russia and revoke an invitation to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to visit. Prime Minister Theresa May said this Wednesday in response to the poisoning of a former Russian double agent in Britain. Britain will also expel 23 Russian diplomats over the NAV agent attack. May said the diplomats have been identified as undeclared intelligence officers, giving them 1 week to leave the UK in the single biggest expulsion for over 30 years. British Prime Minister Theresa May on Wednesday named Moscow as responsible for the NAV agent attack against a former Russian double agent in England. A former military coup leader won the first round of Sierra Leone's presidential election. For more on this, let's join Gabriel Kuma.
A former military coup leader has won the first round of Sierra Leone's presidential election. Julius Maada Bio secures 43.3% of the vote, short of the 55% needed to avoid the second round runoff. He would now face the ruling party's candidate, Samora Kamara, who was behind by just 0.6% in 2 weeks. Should Brigbio win that contest, it will be the second time he has led Sierra Leone, having briefly headed a military junta in 1996. Angela Merkel has been sworn in for the fourth term as German Chancellor after months of political wrangling that left her weakened. German's parliament earlier approved her re-election by 364 votes to 315. Mrs. Merkel has vowed to get to work quickly after the longest period of coalition building. About 23,000 people have been evacuated in a town in central Italy after an unexploded bomb from World War II was found during excavation work. Officials in Fano had said the British-made bomb might explode after it was accidentally activated. Patients were removed from a hospital and train services were suspended before Army and Navy experts removed the device and dropped it into the sea.
Rwanda has banned mosques in the capital Kigali from using loudspeakers during the call to prayers. Let's join Oluwatoyin Yusuf for this and more on the foreign scene.
Rwanda has banned mosques in the capital Kigali from using loudspeakers during the call to prayer. They said the calls made 5 times a day have been disturbing residents of the Nyarugenge district, home of the capital's biggest mosque. But an official from a Muslim association criticized it, saying they could instead keep the volume down. Last month, around 700 churches were closed for not complying with building regulations and noise pollution. The majority of Rwandans are Christians. Muslims make up around 5% of the population. Meanwhile, the leaders of France, Germany, the US and UK have issued a statement on the Nev agent attack in the UK, saying there is no plausible alternative explanation to Russian responsibility. They condemned the first offensive use of Nev agents in Europe since the Second World War, calling it an assault on UK sovereignty. The UK has expelled 23 Russian diplomats in the wake of the incident. Prime Minister Theresa May on Thursday visited the site of the attack in Wiltshire. Russia has denied any involvement in the attack. It has vowed a swift response to the expulsion of its diplomats. The nerve agents was used on a former Russian spy and his daughter in Salisbury. US President Donald Trump has said European Union trade rules make it impossible for American firms to do business with the bloc. Defending his tariff plan has hosted the Swedish PM at the White House. Mr. Trump said other countries are taking advantage of the US for decades. Shortly afterwards, it was announced that White House economic advisor Gary Cohn, who opposes tariffs, would quit. The EU has drawn up a $3.5 billion hit list of retaliatory tariffs.
And for Foreign News Friday, our correspondent is standing by. South Africa's chief prosecutor, Shaun Abrahams, has confirmed former President Jacob Zuma is to face prosecution for 16 charges of corruption. Mr. Abrahams said he believed there were reasonable prospects of a successful prosecution. The charges which Mr. Zuma denies include fraud, racketeering, and money laundering. Mr. Zuma was forced to resign as president last month by his party, the ruling African National Congress. He was facing his 9th no-confidence vote in parliament before he left office. The charges relate to a 30 billion rand government arms deals in the late 1990s before he became president. Moscow said it could hit back at Britain at any minute with its own raft of punitive measures after the West blamed Russia directly for a nav agent attack on a former double agent. President Vladimir Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov on Friday said Russia's sanction could come at any minute, even though he declined to say whether Moscow will deliver its response before Sunday's presidential election. In a rare joint statement, the leaders of Britain, France, Germany and the United States on Thursday condemned the attack on former double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia as an assault on UK's sovereignty. Moscow has vehemently denied it had a hand in the poisoning of its former spy in the cathedral city of Salisbury early this month. Tens of thousands of people in Rio de Janeiro and other cities across Brazil have taken to the streets to mourn a murdered politician who had campaigned against police brutality. Maria Franco, a 38-year-old rural city councillor, was viewed by many as a champion of women's rights. Ms. Franco and her driver were both shot dead while in her car on Wednesday. Brazilian President Michel Temer called her mother an attack on democracy and the rule of law. Many thanks for staying with us on the World News Review on Independent Television Abuja. I'm Nkiru Obuli. Enjoy the rest of the day.